me in welcoming Lola Shoneyin.
Good afternoon, everybody. We've been blessed with rain. I was not expecting rain in Lagos, to be honest. For some reason, I thought Lagos was the one place where it rains once a year, but
At every Ake festival.
Really?
At least once. Yeah.
I think it's the Nairobi blessings. We brought Nairobi blessings. So thank you, Lagos. This is Ake Arts and Book Festival. My name is Muthoni Muiruri, as you know, lovely Miss Lola Shoneyin has said, and I want to welcome you to this very special conversation with this amazing panel. And I'm not even going to dwell on reintroducing because you've done an amazing job. But again, Kayode Onimole, Tunde Onakoya, the inspiration behind this book that we're going to be talking about. And if you don't have a copy, why? What are you doing with your life? Make sure you get a copy. And the force that has brought this book to life, Lola Shoneyin. Round of applause for the panel. So, because it's the afternoon and, we're all from lunch, and because I can already see a few people trying to act like they're sleepy, I want to just get into it by opening up the conversation and, shooting some questions to the panel so that we can open up the conversation. And I will start with Tunde, because I want to hear your voice as well. So, Tunde, what is the first children's book you remember loving?
Good afternoon, everyone. I feel so deeply honored to be here. Please let's give it up for Auntie Lola once again. This is my second Ake festival. I think I spoke at the first one as well, too, yeah. But I also attended a lot of the sessions and I thoroughly enjoyed them. So to answer the question you asked, so a lot of people don't know this, but at the age of 10, I could barely read or write, and it was because, we went to this Paco school, primary school, where, very little learning happened in the classroom. So it was always a struggle for me. So I was more of an artist, so I could draw really well when I was younger. But I don't think I ever read any books outside of like regular school book until someone gave me a gift. 2 gifts, actually. 2 books. The first one was Ivan Chenev's Step-by-Step Chess. It was about chess. But the second one was Gulliver's Travels. And that was the first book I ever read. And of course, my mom told us a lot of stories. So maybe those are the first books, the stories from our own experiences and sometimes imagination. But Gulliver's Travels was one of the first books that introduced me to this world of wonder that existed outside the confines of where I grew up. And it helped me find a new kind of world to escape to. So I think reading that book was a very important inflection point for me, as a kid, from where I grew up with very little knowledge of the world to expanding my mind to what was sort of like attainable outside of that. So yes, that was the first book I read.
Okay, I love that. I think a lot of us grew up on the Gulliver's Travels. I remember also reading it as a young child, and being enthralled in the world that it created. I'm going to move to you, Kayode. Was there a story or character you saw yourself in as a child?
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. When I was a kid, there weren't many books that I saw myself in. In fact, the books I really liked were comic books, and I liked characters that were really intelligent, like Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards, Bruce Wayne. But a character that, I don't think a lot of people know Jesse Wills. It was in a book called The Vengeance Trail of Jesse Wills. And what drew me to that book was the cover. Cover had a guy that looked like Clint Eastwood on it. I was like, yeah, I'm reading this book. And I think that was one of the first novels I ever read. And, well, if you're familiar with Westerns, there's always this scene where the main bad guy and the good guy walk on a road, and then they face each other, and then somebody shouts draw, and then they pull out their guns, and the fastest guy wins. So there was this scene in the book where the bad guy challenged the good guy that, look, we're more than you. If we have a war now, we'll finish you. So let's settle these things as men. I'll come out at noon, you come out at noon, we'll come from opposite sides of the street, and then when we draw, when something happens. And the good guy, Jesse Wills, reported him back that was like, let's not do it at noon, let's do it at 4 p.m. I'll come from the east side of the road. No, sorry, I'll come from the west, and then you come from the east. And the way we'll signal the draw is you throw your hat up, and when it lands, we open fire at each other. So at that point, so that's what happened. And then at the point where the guy throws his hat up and it lands, Jesse Wills had killed him. And he didn't kill him because he was faster. He killed him because he strategically positioned the guy so that when he takes off his hat, the sun will enter his eye and he will go blind for a few seconds. And those are the kind of characters I liked when I was a kid, smart characters. Thank you.
Fantastic. I think that also kind of lets us in on how you ended up doing visual storytelling, right? You've been able to describe it so well. Lola, which book or story made you first realize that stories have power?
Thank you so much for that question. So, when I was, I went to boarding school when I was 6 years old. I went to boarding school in Edinburgh, and I was the only black child in the school.
In case you didn't know, just repeat for the people at the back.
Sorry?
That you went to school in.
I did. I went to boarding school in Edinburgh, Scotland, when I was 6 years old. My parents sort of shipped me off to, because they said my wahala was plenty. And it still is. So while I was there, what I can never forget that every time we had a maths class, especially, my teacher, Miss Connor, would say if we finished everything we were meant to do, she would read to us. And it was like a drug. Everybody would just suddenly, even if you get everything wrong, it doesn't matter because nobody wanted to miss the reading. And the book that she read to us was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And till today, I want to gather Nigerian children together and read the entire book, like over about 6 weeks. It's a fantasy that I have because that book had such a massive impact on me, largely because it was an early introduction to how to create a villain. You know, even as a writer, all those other characters that were in the book. But I also developed such deep empathy, you know, for Charlie. And the book has stayed with me. So every time I go to, when we're ordering books, even for WIDA, I always order one or two because I just want somebody else to discover what I experienced.
Round of applause. Don't be shy. Don't be shy, guys. I want us to get into the book now. I think we've sort of like set the scene for what the discussion is going to be like. And what I've picked is, you know, and it's something that was spoken about at the earlier panel that I sat in on which stories, the stories that matter regarding representation. And I want to talk about this book because I've read it with my 4-year-old and she loves it, by the way. So great job to the panel. And putting out this story in specific, putting out the story of Tunde, his inspiring story, is part of contributing to this narrative of possibility and hope, for African children. For you, Lola, what about Tunde's journey? What about his story felt important for young readers in this moment in time?
So it's really easy. I've kind of been in the domain of fiction, kind of all the books that I've been writing. And I also remember when I was younger that I used to read nonfiction. So you'd read about somebody's life. Even Roald Dahl wrote Boy, which is kind of a autobiographical. There were other books like that. And I wasn't seeing the sort of books that I thought kids would really want to engage with. But beyond that, even when people are writing about Nigerian heroes, it's the usual suspects. You will see Fumilayo Ransom Kuti on the list. You'll see, there's certain characters that are always on those, in those series. And for me, the big issue was that young people can't relate as well to people who lived in that, what seems now like in those times. And I started seeing Tunde's, the stuff he was doing on social media. And I was fascinated by the kind of deep respect that people seem to have for his work. And I thought to myself, when I kind of dug around and learned more about him, that this is actually the kind of hero that Nigerian children need to read about. This is somebody that they can see. And I'm not just talking about middle-class children. I'm talking about children who come from very poor families. They need their own heroes too. So why not give them kind of a beautifully illustrated book that tells his story? And I'm doing another one as well about, this time, a young lady. So it's something that I want to do, maybe just to do 5 books that kind of cover the life story of a youngish person as a way of inspiring the next generation.
Tunde, so for you, seeing your life adapted for a children's book, I would assume is as a real experience. Was this in the bingo cards for you? Is it something you had perhaps thought about? Is it something you were keen on? Or, did Lola contact you and say, I'm doing it, let's go?
So, it's interesting, the way things have sort of turned out. Because I remember 8 years ago, when I had this epiphany that I could actually do something with my talent, right? I knew how to play chess better than most people. And I had this opportunity to sort of like leave the country and Jakba and, work, as a chess, to develop a chess program in a school in the UK. And I was actively making plans to Jakba, to leave, Nigeria at the time. But then something happened. 2 things happened, actually. The first one was, so I used to go to church. I used to play piano then, and the other guys in my band used to smoke weed. But they didn't want to let me know. They didn't want to tell me. So probably they thought I would report them to the pastor. But of course, I wasn't going to do that. But I didn't smoke, So I would insist on going with them because I cared about the stories in places like that. You see the hard guys with machete, like scars on their faces, and I wanted to listen to their stories. I was that curious about people's stories. And it was in that moment that I saw kids as well, smoking, doing hard drugs. And it was in that moment I felt something, right? I remembered that this used to be me because of the environment in which I grew up in. But someone took a chance on me by just giving me a chessboard. It seemed like something so inconsequential at the time, but it was that moment that completely altered the trajectory of my life. And it was the first time I ever considered coming back to do the same thing for other children like me. I never really understood like how meaningful our talents could be beyond ourselves, right? So that was the way I knew it then, that if I play chess and I excel at it, it would serve me personally. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the same way we're all here, in different capacities, be it the gift of eloquence or you being a writer, whatever skill or talents that you have, it can bring you personal success. But there's something so much more meaningful that can be done with your talent if you just extend it a bit further. And that is when it becomes a gift to another person. Or if it gives, another person a sense of belonging to something. So, and that was me extending my talent of chess to these kids that were just there doing hard drugs, because that was frankly the only other scripts life had made available to them. So that was really the genesis of, using chess as a tool to help these children find their place in the world. And I didn't know all the details or what the end was going to be, but I had complete faith in doing it. And I decided to just suspend my traveling plans and just focus on teaching the kids. It was a painful sacrifice to make at the time because I was 23, but I did it. Now, fast forward to last year when Auntie Lola reached out to me. A lot had happened, in those 8 years. I had given so much, not just myself, but a lot of people that had joined me on this delusional dream of using chess to change the world. And we had done a lot of things. And in the details of it, I understood how important it was to tell the stories of these children. I think that is what I would say was the most important thing, the most significant thing we did with social media. It was telling stories in a way that dignified the children rather than really focus or hyperfixate on the poverty. We all know the problems. We see it all the time. But there was a new layer of it that, someone had to tell. And that was very quickly a gift I knew that I had, to be able to tell these deeply compelling stories that would make people feel real empathy. There's a distinction between pitying a situation and feeling real empathy and compassion for it. So I think it was one of those stories that she saw when she reached out to me, and she was like, Tunde, we need to tell the chess and slum story, but not just the chess and slum story, but at the intersection of your own life, so people understand the reason behind the man. And of course, I said no, because I thought the story wasn't complete yet. And for those that probably follow me on Twitter, you see that sometimes it takes 5 years or 6 years before I can even tell a story, of a child, from 0 to taking them to 1. So I just kept refusing. I remember my manager also called me and it was like, oh, the story is never done. And I was like, I don't know. So she insisted that we should go and get coffee together. And we ended up talking for hours. And in the narration of every single thing that we had done, and having to also sort of search deeply into my own childhood instead, I think it eventually dawned on me that this was an important story to tell, right? And even at the time, I was also feeling in some way that maybe I won't be here for a long time. Maybe it makes sense to actually sort of detail it now. And as the story continues to unravel, then we can continue to add, more to it over time. So she was eventually able to convince me that it was right to tell it. And we had a long conversation. I had to really go back in time. I'd never really thought about my childhood. It was just too much, but I had to deal with that. Sort of pure layers of suppressed, emotions and some trauma memories as well. But I'm glad we were able to bring it to life. And I was in Dubai recently and it was sold out in Dubai. And I was like, wow, this is truly incredible. And there was a child that came up to me and said, oh, remember when this happened to you? How did you feel? And I guess that was the child seeing a bit of himself in my story in that specific context. And I'm just super glad that, the story is out there now. And I hope it helps every child believe in their own magic as well.
I think it's a gift. It's a gift to so many children. It's an inspiring story. And I'm so glad you eventually said yes, because nobody says no to Lola One. So you should have known that. in the first instance. But no, I'm really glad you said yes. I want to stay on that point and ask, because it's a small book. It's adapted for children. What parts of your life, or what did you feel strongly about that you wanted to be included in this book, like to drive that story?
I think it was the later part of taking some of the kids to the US. I think we added that afterwards. It wasn't initially a part of the first draft. So earlier this year, we took 5 children from some of the worst slums, we took them to America. And not only did they win like medals at the, chess and community championship in Atlanta, one of them went on to win the United Nations, chess tournament, and also like the NYC ICN network tournament as well. So it was a moment, but so that was like we went from Atlanta to New York. Then we decided to break the world record again. But this time I wasn't alone. When we broke the world record last year, it was just me. But this time, the 5 kids were with me. And I remember sometime in the maybe 50th hour, because this time we're going all the way to 64 hours. I was tired. I was completely done. I started to hallucinate, I was seeing spiders. And that was when I knew I was losing my mind. And I looked at my opponent, E2, was going through it. And we actually wanted to give up. And I told him, I was like, why are we even doing this? And in that moment, I just looked up and I looked at the table beside me. So we had like an exhibition table for the kids as well, where they were playing and other people were coming to watch their games. And it was right in the heart of Times Square. And there were hundreds of people not even watching my game, but watching their games. So people were bringing their kids to come and play the other kids, that we came with. And it was in that moment that it occurred to me that, the world had finally seen these children. And when I say see, it is important to phrase it like this. And for those of us that live in Lagos, you see a lot of these kids on the streets, the homeless kids. You're driving in traffic, you see them walk up to your car. I saw a tweet a couple of days ago, someone was threatening to be violent against these children. And it really breaks my heart because I know that even though we see them, they're almost invisible to us, right? Because if what you feel towards a child, that is trying to be visible in his own way is anger, then you're not seeing that child for what he can truly become. And for me, that moment in Times Square sort of crystallized it that people had come to watch the kids play chess. They had won all these medals and done exceptionally well, right? But just a couple of years ago, like, no one saw them. Like, one of the girls was this girl that I saw in an IDP camp, somewhere in Yola, like in a place without electricity or internet. And now she's in the US, and she's playing chess, and people can recognize and see her brilliance. Because she has gone through this transition of me, meeting her, telling her story, and making sure she's visible to the world in a kind way that people can see a life, the possibility of a life, rather than the poverty that has sort of like covered her in this deep shadow where we see her, but we don't truly see, So I think that was like a major highlight for me in the book. Taking the kids to America, of course, it was a successful trip. But then if it were a movie, that would be the final trajectory of the story where, the music, the lights come on, and it's beautiful, happy ending. But then again, there are no real happy endings. There are no permanent happy endings. But that for me was an highlight, yes, going to America with the kids.
Yeah, great. Moving over to you, Kayode. Visually bringing this story to life, illustrating a real person's childhood is quite the unique responsibility because you're drawing back, you're referencing photos, you're referencing old images, you're trying to bring out emotion. And because it is a children's book, and it was mentioned here earlier, children will read via sight, right? They will read their pictures. And even just speaking for my own daughter, and we were having this conversation earlier, and I was telling you, at 2 years old, I would open a book and give her the book, and she would tell me what's happening purely by the images and the illustration, and to a point where there was no point in reading, because if the illustration is really good, she would actually tell me exactly how the story was going. For you to be able to stay true to, who Tunde was as a young boy, what were your guiding principles to be able to stay true, but also to be able to have artistic expression and interpretation of the images or what you had in your mind? What was that process for you?
Thank you. First of all, I went online and then looked for as many pictures as I could find of Tunde. And if you check online, you'll find out that like 95% of the pictures are him at this age, and he always has his hat on. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to draw his hat, but how does he look? How does he look without the hat? So luckily for me, I told Alice that, look, I'm having issues with Tunde. Do you have any pictures of him younger, any pictures of him with that? And she just paraded my WhatsApp, but just images. So I used those as reference. What's this? Hello? Can you hear me? Yeah. You can hear me? I'm serious, I can't hear myself. Can you hear me? Hey. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Yes. Yeah, okay. Village people. Anyway, I got pictures of his parents. We didn't get many pictures of him as a kid, but I could, based on, because your skull structure remains basically the same as I know it was a caricature, but your skull structure remains the same basically most of your life. So I used that as a base and then got images with it. And Alice was also very, okay, there's this thing called shape theory, where you use a shape and then that's what helps you guide, that's what guides you to rotate the character. And she focused on his jaw, and I could see the square in his jaw, and that's basically what I used for most of his head. His head is a square, his jaw is a square. And that's what I used all through. And I have pictures of him without his hat if anybody wants to buy.
Tunde, I think I just want to ask you, because I'm curious, what was your reaction to the first iteration of the illustration?
It's too risky to share work in progress with the subject. I mean, that was my conclusion then. I just thought, no. Crow and I have done this thing so many times. And I remember the first one he sent to me, I just said, nah, that jaw is not quite right. Once we get that jawline, everything else will fall in place. And he did it again, and it was just spot on. Okay. The guy is a genius.
He is. I mean, you just need to get a copy of the book just to see how accurate that depiction is. I want to move on to you, Lola. You have, shaped African literature in a lot of ways. As a writer, as a publisher, as a bookseller, as, a change maker, and you wear all these hats. And there is one question that I'm sure everybody in this room has probably asked: when is the next novel coming out?
You're such a traitor.
No, wait. No, this is where I'm going with this. And we're all waiting because we've all read and loved Baba Segi. But I have a hunch, and it perhaps because we speak a lot, that your heart is in writing for children. And I want to ask, specifically, going back, what drew you specifically to writing for children? Or what emotional truth do you feel children's stories allow you to express that perhaps adult fiction does not allow for or give room for?
Thank you so much for that question. Anybody who's waiting for the novel, the next one, they should keep waiting. Okay, so I have to just tell you the genesis of this children's book thing and how it happened. So when I started having kids, I decided I was going to write one for each of them. So in 2010, I wrote a book for my first son, Mayowa. He's 30 years old. And it's called Mayowa and the Masquerades, which I now regret even using the word masquerades. I mean, new knowledge and how, I was saying it that, because it has a very specific meaning, and that is not what Egungun is. So anyway, I wrote that book, and then in 2016, I got together with a company called Marine Platforms, and they gave me this contract to go and put a library in 100 schools in northern Nigeria. So then I thought, okay, when you're doing these big things, convenience is important. And I'd kind of just developed the relationship with Kaduna and Kaba Fest, the festival that we organize in Kaduna State. So I said, let's just put them all in Kaduna because it's easy to get to places. I know the people. And they said, yeah, go for it. So I went to do my research. I went into some state schools, and I spent a lot of my life being a school teacher. A lot of people don't know this about me, but I went from teacher to deputy principal. I was a deputy principal for 3 years at Regent Secondary School in Abuja. I was headhunted from the UK. So I had this urge. Every time I see children, I just want to read to them. It's just instinctive almost. So I decided to go, but I was a little bit ashamed of my Mayowa and the Masquerade, so I hid it. I sat on it, and then I brought out Gruffalo, Elmer, and we're going on a bear hunt. And I thought, let me bring the Oyinbo classics to these children. So I said, gather round. They gathered round. This is a state school in Kaduna. I opened Gruffalo. If you had seen the expression on the faces of the children, like, what is this mad ojuju this woman has brought? They were so disconnected and weirdly just not interested. They were just looking at me. I said, okay, let me try Elmer. Brought that one out, opened it. This patchwork elephant, again, made no sense. Did the same with bear hunt. So I thought, okay, let me just try my own book, because I didn't quite understand why they were not connecting with those stories. So I brought out my book and opened it. The minute these kids saw a black face, right? And the first set of pictures, there's some women selling Gary. The minute they saw those images, they immediately just moved closer to me. And then from that moment, right, from then till I finished reading the book, every time I opened the spread, they would look at the expression or the gestures being made by the kids, and they would all copy them. So I just thought, all this time I've been, mouthing off about representation. I didn't fully understand it until that moment, how important it is that children see themselves in books. So I thought to myself, I asked the teachers, what books are they reading? No books really. So I said, let me go to the whatever little markets there are just to check where are they getting their books. And I couldn't find a book that truly captured the lived experience of these children in state schools. So I decided I was going to write a book set in each state in northern Nigeria. So that's how I started the Northern Lights series. And I'm now on number 8. I've done Kaduna, Nasarawa. Crow and I just finished the Borno book, which was the hardest to write because capturing grief for a kid was just it's so complicated for us, and just trying to get the story right. You don't want to scare them, you don't want to hurt them, but children feel pain too. And they internalize and they express it differently. And a lot of it is going on here, and they don't necessarily talk about it. So those were the things that we had to really think about. I think we've done 3 drafts now, just going back and forth, saying change it, do this, do this. But that's what I'm doing. And in doing that, I just totally fell in love with the idea of writing for children. It makes me so happy when I see kids, it's not really about me, it's about that they love a book, or a parent says to me, my kid, Yaji is her favorite. So it just makes me incredibly happy, because then I feel like there's real impact. And then when I know how to do something, the next thing for me that comes to mind is, how can I pass this on to as many people as possible? So we made that very grand announcement that we want to publish 100 books by the end of 2027. And it was interesting for me to have those little books, have other people, the authors that were in the previous panel, they are all part of the Bookstorm project. And I wanted to do something in nonfiction that other people could replicate as well, with other heroes in other parts of Nigeria.
Oh, did I say change maker or did I say change maker? That's fantastic, Lola. You're inspiring, and I think I tell you that a lot. But yeah, I want to move to you, Tunde, because the book is Tunde Onakoya, the chess champion, and you have described stumbling upon chess in a barber shop, when you were a young boy. When you look back now, what do you think that moment awakened in you that you couldn't quite name as a child when you stumbled on chess?
Sorry, I didn't read the questions. That's why I'm taking time to think.
No, take your time.
No, I didn't read the questions that were sent to the email. So.
Wow, you were even sent the questions.
Yeah. So I think very vividly, so it was like the first time I walked into the barber shop. I remember I had dropped out of school then, so I wasn't going to school. Sometimes I would go to the market with my mom. Some other days I would lie that I had malaria and just sneak out, because the barber shop had a game center. I think it was PlayStation 1 then too. So I remember when I saw him in just one corner, and he was reading a book, and he was like playing against himself. So apparently he was analyzing a position. So I was just immediately drawn to the pieces, right? The delicate way in which they were carved. So it's just the kind of thing a child would see and would have like a myriad of questions. So I had a lot of questions. Why does this look like a donkey? It's not a donkey tonight. Why does this look small like this? Why does this one have a big mouth? The bishop. And so for me, immediately registered as, that deep curiosity about something that I'd never seen before. And the Bible went on to tell me that, chess is a game that makes people smart. That was exactly what it said. And I wanted to be smart because, we had a very tough, childhood, and it really affected my self-esteem, as a kid. So I was a very quiet one. I would never say anything, never contribute, always at the back of the class. So I went back home, and I guess it was one of the few things that started to give me this agency, right? The first time, I got a cardboard, I drew out the squares myself. I got clay, I molded the chess pieces. Then I'll teach my brother, then I'll watch them play at the barber shop, then come and use that to beat my brother, and on and on and on. So when the barber asked me to play for the first time, it was a challenge. And it was also an opportunity. Someone gave me an opportunity to prove my mettle, to show what I had learned over time. and I lost in 2 moves, And but then I didn't give up. Then I tried again, and I tried again, and I tried again. Then it became 5 moves, and it became 10. And one day I got a draw, and the barber couldn't believe it because he had been playing chess for at least 20 years of his life. Getting a draw against him was a moment for me. And I guess in retrospect now, and I have said this a couple of times as well, what chess was giving me was a deep sense of, like, a new sense of that, like, forging my own identity outside of what was attainable to me, right? Again, I've said this, that what I think is one of the greatest tragedies of poverty is it robs children. Children are the ones that bear the most brunt of it, of their identities, long before they have any agency. So it's like they go through this entire phase where they've been deprived of the right education, exposure, even nutrition, and the environment they're born into, and they become victims of their parents' poverty. And they come out of that and become adults that have no place in society, right? And they have their own kids, and that vicious cycle just continues to propagate itself. So chess for me was what gave me a way to break out of that cycle, because it first helped me understand, the power of my own mind, that I could apply my mind in this way, right? And there was almost no element of luck. So it gave me a deep understanding of consequences as well, how to think through complexity, right? How to remove information that was unnecessary. So all of this was sort of like they were the building blocks of me learning how to think. So chess got me thinking about thinking, right? So it helped me learn how to think about thinking. So all of this, for the mind of a 10-year-old kid that had never been outside Ikorodu before, it was changing me, from within. And it was helping me to understand that me just showing great aptitude for chess, meant that I was better than the other kids that we grew up in the same place. So I started to see myself differently. Then I went to a tournament for the first time. Then I beat this Indian kid from this expatriate school, and I won a medal for the first time. I saw my dad cry for the first time. So I was owning a new identity for myself that even my parents didn't understand. I was leaning to be an intellectual, someone who could use his mind, someone who could be excellent at chess. And all of these experiences, what it really infuses is that self-determinism, into a child. And I think it's the greatest thing you can ever do for any child. That you don't just tell them that it can become, that you show them in a very practical way by enabling them, yeah? And you just watch them use that to change the trajectory of their own lives. And this is sort of like come full circle with the children that I work with, because I know what chess can do for them, even beyond the science of it, the cognitive benefits, critical thinking, all of that. It imbues them with the deep sense of identity that they can forge and find, a way to understand their own minds through this very practical game, that teaches them. So I can say that in hindsight now, but at the time I was just deeply curious about this new world of wonder that I found through chess. And that has inadvertently, helped me, find my place in the world. And now I just want to use the rest of my life to help other children do the same thing as well.
Thank you. Kayode, I want to come to you just before we get to Q&A. And if you have any questions, start thinking about your questions. We're going to jump into Q&A in about 1 minute. So Kayode, you have 1 minute. But I want to talk about Bookstorm because, Lola has mentioned it. And I also wanted you to talk a little bit about Bookstorm and what it is, because I feel like 50 of those books are in this room.
I'm always praying,
Yeah,
everywhere I go, that I can get a few people who are interested in writing for children and are prepared to put in the work.
Yeah.
Because it's not easy. Just because it's 300 words doesn't mean it's an easy thing to do. But I feel like with the right kind of passion, you can achieve it, and with the right guidance.
Okay. So Kayode, you are a self-taught illustrator who began as an architect or in architecture. And so it's going to be on two parts, right? The first part is when did you realize that visual storytelling was the space where your talent and your purpose met? So that would be the first part of the question. But the second part is if we're thinking about Bookstorm and what Bookstorm is doing in terms of now providing training to ensure that the illustration is at global standards. What do you, from where you stand, what kind of support or ecosystem do you believe would transform illustration in Nigeria? And, more so because I'm speaking from a Kenyan perspective, who's a huge consumer of these books that I also distribute to Kenyan children, but so for Africa in general as well.
That's a very layered question. You might have to ask me the second part again. So the first part, how I knew, oddly enough, when I was younger, people, because I was, like I said, I like comics. So I was making comics, I was drawing stories. So people around me knew where I was going before I knew where I was going. So I chose architecture as a course in school. Even my classmates, my teachers were like, that, yeah, you don't belong here, you belong in fine art. And, and I still, my dad was, I just finished his architecture. Anything you want to do after, I will pay for it. So I did my BSc. He said, oh, just do your master's. When you do your master's, don't worry, I'll pay for it. I did my master's. I said, I never said anything like that. You did it all by yourself. So, so I've known, so I started practicing architecture for a while. And then I have a friend from school who works in advertising. And at some point, they needed an illustrator to help them with the storyboard. And they called me. I did it. I'd never done a storyboard. I didn't even know what a storyboard was. I did it for them. They were really happy with my work, and they kept on calling me. So at some point, I quit my architecture job and then went home to stay with my parents. And my dad spoke to one of his friends and put me in another architecture firm. I did that for, in fact, I didn't even last there. I just went to speak to the guy one day. I said, I'm not doing this anymore. I didn't write a letter, and then I went home. And then from there, I started doing, I did a cartoon strip called Crasher. And one of my friends got an in Guardian newspaper, and they were looking for content for their page. So his page was written, and then I had a small space at the bottom where I sent my cartoon strip. And then somebody contacted him because of that cartoon strip that they wanted an illustration for a book, a textbook for kids. So it got in contact with me. I did the first one. I got a lot of notes that my characters are looking too sexy, that I should reduce their hair, remove their earrings, remove the high heels, I should reduce their bust, reduce their... I was like, okay. But I did it anyway. And then the notes came back like, why are your women looking like men? So I did that for a while. And then I got more and more gigs for illustrations. And at Ake 2018, I met LS through, I told you I did a cartoon strip called Crasher. I had a super fan, as in, I've not seen any fan like that guy. I've never met him before in my life. Guy, anytime I post a strip online, guy takes it, puts it on Twitter, puts it on Facebook, tells all his friends about it. And I was like, I've never met the guy. Then I met him at Ake, and apparently he knew LS. Shegun.
Yeah. So Shegun, I know, is also the person who does the entire layout of Ake Review. He has done it for us now. I think this is his 10th one. He doesn't even live in Nigeria. But yeah, shout out to Shegun.
So I got introduced to LS, and then we had a meeting one day. I don't know if she remembers this meeting, but she told me her ideas for children's books and how an adult sees a book and how a child, I don't know if you remember this, but an adult reads a book and, hey, that was a good book, and then he might never pick it up again. But a child, if he loves that book, he's going, Mommy, I want to read that book. Mommy, please read this book to me. And one of the things she said was, each time they read the book, they should experience something different. So if you look, even in Tunde Onakoya's book, we hide things in the background. And if you have a keen eye, you might see them the first time, you might see them on the second reading or third reading. Sorry, the second question, please. Book buzz.
So the second question, and I want you to answer it real quick because I know there are people here with questions, is because you did start as a self-taught illustrator, but now going through the Bookstorm project and getting technical training, how has that, impacted your work?
Well, we don't have an official school for book illustrators here. So recently, Book Buzz organized a illustration course with about 50 students, 45 students, and Festival of Illustration, and 9 teachers from Croatia, Slovenia, sorry, yeah, so, South America. And then we had classes, and it opened my eyes to a lot of things. There are things that I thought I knew, but apparently I don't know anything. And I've been drawing for like maybe 10 years plus. And yeah, we need more things like that in Nigeria and in Africa generally.
All right, I will open it up to the floor. We have time for perhaps 2 questions, and I see your hand went up. So the lady in white.
Hi. Good afternoon. I want to say thank you guys so much for everything you've said so far. So my question is for Lola. Tunde said that when you first pitched the idea of his book, he refused because he didn't feel ready, like he was still on his journey. My question for you is, how did that feel for you when he seemed to reject the idea? What encouraged you to keep pushing? I mean, you're a very determined person, I can tell. And I want to know how you feel and what keeps you going and what you say to yourself when you want to achieve a dream or a desire and you encounter obstacles that can be very discouraging. What's your thought frame when you are set out to achieve things?
Thanks for that question. The thing is, maybe when things happen to different people, they remember things differently. So I don't remember him actually saying no. What he said was that he didn't think it was appropriate because he wasn't even 30 years old. Like, is it right? Should I? My journey has barely started. I mean, those were his concerns. So what I did was to say to him, look, I said, look at Wole Soyinka. He's written Ake, My Years of Childhood, Ibadan, Kwenkele Mercy Years. You can keep on writing memoirs at different stages of your life. And that's what I said to him. I said, but this one is really important. So it's interesting you mentioned the word obstacles, because I often say to people that I have obstacle blindness. I don't see obstacles. When I want to do something, there's a way that I can plan it in my brain, right? I know where I am and I know where I need to get to. And over the years, I realized that when I share those plans with people, they either think I'm crazy or they just don't buy into it. So what I do now is I tell people things in stages. And it was easy for me to then go back and say, you know what, I'm going to make it as painless as possible. This is the process. This is how we're going to do it. I'll come and see you. We'll talk. I will send you a draft. You will look at it, fill in the gaps. I will have more questions. And he agreed. And for me, it was the easiest part of it. The most complicated part was actually getting the book right in terms of the illustrations and the story. Thank you.
We have some questions on this side. The lady right there with her hand raised to the high heavens.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Shikemi. My question is for Tunde. So you mentioned seeing a tweet about somebody being violent towards these children in traffic, right? And the thing is that people actually experience violence from these children, first of all. I heard of someone who was pushed into traffic by one of these children because she didn't give them money. My question is like, how exactly does one draw the line? What does one do in such a situation?
That is a good question. And and maybe give me some time to explain this. So there's this quote that goes, "A child who is not embraced by the village, will grow up to burn it down. Will burn it down to feel its warmth." So I've spent the last 8 years like working with children like that, high risk. And for those that have really followed the details of like the work, if you remember when we went to Osho the Under Bridge. So Osho the Under Bridge is like a criminal hub, but like that is the epicenter of where those kids, sort of like learn all of those things. Now, the thing is, and it is human to feel like the first emotion you feel when something like that happens is to be annoyed or irritated. There's been a lot of stories of, crimes, violence, all the very bad things that they've done. And I'm not saying that is not true. But Chimamanda explained to us, that the danger of the single story, it's not that it is untrue, but that it is incomplete. There's an even deeper layer, right? Which is why, like, one of the things I don't do is like when I see people, I don't judge them by how they're dressed or how they look, because we have to refuse the impulse to be reactive, to the first thing that we understand about any person. It is easy to be immediately reactive to a child trying to even maybe break your side mirror, right? And that is very valid, don't get me wrong. But have searched deeper to understand what lies beneath that child. Because that child is trying to make his life matter in some sense. It's trying to make his anger known. And he's going to do it in any way. Right. So I believe children should be extended that grace, because I've seen miracles happen when you show them just a bit of compassion. And I'll just wrap it up, with this final story, something that happened just last year before I traveled to the US, even before the world record. It was the day before I traveled, and I went to the mall to get a few things. And I was bringing them to my car. So as I opened my car door, these two kids walked up to me, right? Really young, probably 13, 14, and they were asking me for money. And those kids are the same kids that along that Jakonde road, they'll come to your cars, bang your windows, ask you for money, and do all sorts of things. So I was trying to see if I had any change to give them, right? And while I was doing that, one of the boys just looked at me, and he was like, "Chess players." And there's this mantra like we teach the kids in our program. We say chess players observe. So apparently in 2023, December, the entire month of December, we had like a chess program around that area for children, like every single day from 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock. Throughout the month of December in 2023, we were with those kids. Those kids, about like 60 of them, we gathered them behind Naked Art Gallery. We were teaching them chess, mental math every day. So that boy wasn't one of the kids that participated in that program. But on the day of the final tournament that we had for the children that played in the tournament, he was there observing from a distance. So when we chanted that mantra, he heard it, and that stayed with him. So when he said chess players, he had recognized me from that tournament day. And I said, observe. And I asked him, what is your name? He said his name is Yusuf. He was speaking Yoruba. And I was asking, like, what are you doing here? How old are you? He says he's 13. He said he came in from Abeokuta. He left home when he was 9. So he had been on the streets trying to survive by himself. And listen, this story is not a unique one, I promise. But what we just fail to do, like I said, is that we have to refuse the first single story about any person or any people and search deeper to understand the reason, behind the child. And I promise you, the only reason we have such proliferation of area boys is because nobody becomes an area boy as an adult. It is the child that was neglected that becomes the area boy, that becomes a menace to society. So this is how the child's innocence is lost. Because that boy has a similar story to the many other thousands that I've heard. Extreme poverty, left home, probably late mother, trying to survive, met a few friends, formed a clique, go out on the streets, harass people for money, beg for money. They get even sometimes raped by people, and they have to use a lot of hard drugs because they have to be much harder than the reality that life has chosen for them on the streets. They have to be much harder, and the only way to do this is by losing all of their innocence. And that boy is just 13, but you can see in his eyes that the sparkle is completely gone. And he has probably been using a lot of hard drugs, which I'm almost 90% sure of, And while I was talking to this boy, there was a Range Rover that just drove past. And this lady just wound down her windows and she was like, Chessmaster, is that you? I was like, yes. So she came down from her car and she said, oh my God, I'm such a big fan of you. I follow you on Instagram. My son is here. And she was like, Jaden, come down. And this soft boy just came down with his Gucci sandals, and soft American accent. The boy is probably 10 or 11. And he walked to me and she wanted me to take a picture with him, and I did. And after taking a picture, with the kid, he was just standing there, and I was talking to the mom. And I just sort of like glanced over, and I saw that the Yusuf kid I was talking to and Jaden, they were standing side by side. And I immediately saw Yusuf's demeanor just change in the presence of this boy. And Yusuf is a street kid that has been hardened, very rebellious. But in that moment, like I could see that his countenance had sort of like fallen. And I asked him to introduce himself to Jaden and asked him to shake hands. And Jaden immediately stretched his hand and said, hey, my name is Jaden. And Yusuf couldn't speak English, so he wasn't sure what to say. And I sort of like moderated it and told him, just tell him your name as well, right? Then Jaden and the mom left. Then Yusuf also gave him some money and he left. But I couldn't stop thinking about the boy on my drive back home. Because this is what happens, right? The only difference between Jaden and Yusuf literally is that Yusuf has missed out on the lottery of birth. And that has defined the entire scope, trajectory of his life. And this is how it sort of like pans out. Jaden probably at some point goes to Harvard, becomes a doctor, an architect, whatever. But then maybe he comes back at some point. But the truth is, Jaden and Yusuf will never be in the same space. There's nothing in our present society now that puts Jaden and Yusuf in the same space. They will never be in the same classroom. They will never go to the same social clubs. There's no context for which these two kids would ever be and exist together, right? And Yusuf would have to continue to lose all of his innocence to be able to survive. Then one day, right, he would do something really bad. And when you cross that Rubicon, there's no coming back from it, right? And by doing that, he has completely shed that innocence completely. And those kids that walk up to your car and they're begging you for money, they're doing all of that, they will hold a gun and they wouldn't have to beg you. They will take it through violence. Then we eventually complain about the effect of that while neglecting the cause for so many years. Now, this is the interesting paradox here. Like I said, the only gap is Yusuf did not get the compassion and love that he needed to grow to become a man that would be useful to himself and society. But Jaden got that. So Yusuf had to fill that gap in some way. Nature abhors a vacuum, right? And there's no way in the world that something would not happen to Yusuf. As long as that gap remains, something more sinister would fill it. So that is why you see that kid becomes a problem. And the effect to you is that they come, they push you, they harass you, and you become angered by that. But I tell you, I've met many Yusufs. I told you one of them came to America with us. There's Fawaz, I used to be a kid like that is now a software engineer. There are a lot of them that are now in the university over this 10 years that I've given my life to, telling a new story about Yusuf. So the conclusion of what I'm saying is, your feelings are very valid, right? Right? But it is entirely up to us as young people, right, to refuse to be reactive to the first emotion that we feel about these kids. It is our only way of seeing them truly, right? Because no one else is going to do that. And it's by looking beyond that, beyond their mistakes, that we're able to unearth something so much more beautiful that is just laying under that we cannot help them become. And whatever capacity like you choose to do that, it's entirely up to you. I have chosen my mountain, which is using my own talent of chess. Whether you go on to become an entrepreneur, in whatever capacity you build out your life, just always have it at the back of your mind that the only way to justify a privilege is to have a sense of duty to children like Yusuf, not to rebuke or refuse them. Because if we continue to do that, right, then we're never going to be able to solve the problem. There's a level of compassion that is needed. It is very hard. It is very difficult. But when you look beyond it, I promise you, the only reason why I can be here today is because I've looked beyond the obvious, right? And I've helped these children and shown them in a different light to society, right? And the world now sees them not for their past or their mistakes or as those street kids, but they have been finally like refined by this gift of chess, that has made the possibility of their life the more obvious thing, right? So that is, I hope that answers your question in some way. But again, thank you.
Wow. Wow, I think that answers all our questions. And unfortunately, we have run out of time. But, my panelists will be out there to answer any additional questions. We have an exciting announcement to make before we completely wrap up. And I think I'll give Lola the opportunity to make the announcement. But my parting shot will be this. If you have a child, a neighbor who's a child, if you know a friend who has kids, if you know a friend of a friend of a friend who has a child, you must buy this book. And you must get this book into every child's hand, at least the kids you know. And if you can, please buy a couple of books and donate them to schools because, like exactly what Tunde has said, that power of representation and seeing yourself and having hope and having something that you can look up to, which is what this book provides. So please make sure that all the copies that we have out there are over in the next 10 minutes. You guys are great. So Lola?
So a few weeks ago, I was contacted by my agent, and it appears that a publisher in the UK who covers the UK and the US loves our story so much that they now want to publish an edition for their own market.